Before we begin this Microsoft Digital event, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work throughout Australia, as well as the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people viewing this event today. We pay our respects to elders both past, present and emerging, and recognise and celebrate their continuing connection to land, waters and community. Our reverence also extends to all First Nation and Indigenous peoples, as well as their ancestral lands.
G'day everyone and welcome to the AI-powered Business Applications Bootcamp. My name's Nathan Bacchus, Power Platform Technical Lead based in New South Wales, and I'm joined by Fu Shen. Fu Shen, do you just want to give a quick introduction, mate?
Hi everyone, Fu Shen. I'm part of PowerCat. I'm a program manager in PowerCat. I'm based in Sydney, Australia.
Awesome, thanks Fu Shen. And today we're going to be discussing Power Platform governance and security controls in the era of AI. So we're also got Q&A associated to this session as well. So if you have any questions, we have Olga Juritska in the background who will be answering any questions that come through the chat, and we'll come back on camera with Fu Shen and Eugene a little bit later on, and we'll answer some questions live if we have a bit of time left. But what are we going to be discussing today? So the agenda for today's session is I'm going to take on the first half of the session. We're going to talk about the importance of governance in the age of AI and just talk about some fundamental principles associated to governance in Power Platform in general. Fu Shen's then going to take over and talk about some of the cool stuff that we have in managed environments to take a lot of that load off admins to be able to manage governance across Power Platform, and some of the new features that we have across the Power Platform as well from a governance perspective. Then at the end, Eugene's going to come on and ask myself and Fu Shen a few questions. But I might kick off my part of the presentation. So you might have heard this quote before, but in the future, we're going to go from working side by side with people to working side by side with AI. But that doesn't necessarily mean that digital transformation still isn't powered by people. In fact, quite the opposite. It's anticipated that end users will develop 4 times the amount of digital solutions that experienced developers will in the future. So there's going to be an influx of solutions developed by people that don't come from your traditional IT or software engineering background. And organizations that have been the first adopters or embraced AI will be the trailblazers essentially to bring in accelerated growth and value creation. So low code and AI work harmoniously together. In fact, around 10% of all the data that's generated in the future by 2025 will be from generative AI sources, and that's up from less than 1% in 2021. So an influx of AI generated data. And on the flip side of that, we also have around 65% of applications being developed on low code technologies as well. So you can see they're both trending in the upward direction, and it's no secret that at some point they're going to mesh together. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how AI and low code can work better together, and then essentially how you can govern low code and also leverage AI in some of the management features as well. So based on a couple of case studies that have been done, 80% of CIOs have actually indicated that integrating AI and low code together would help them maximize technology. So effectively what that tells me is CIOs aren't necessarily scared of it, they're looking to embrace it. And also based on another case study, and coincidentally 87% as well, of CIOs have indicated that low code has already made their organizations more efficient and also increased employee innovation as well. So there is already a predominant use of low code throughout these organizations, and also the willingness to adapt to AI within low code technologies as well. And what is powering this change? It's a combination of 3 key things: people, process, and innovation. And what that results in is optimal end user experiences from both a customer perspective and also a business perspective. So that could be transforming business processes or transforming customer facing processes, but people combined with process and innovation is what's driving this. And because of the influx of end user created applications, is creating a new norm. No longer are we referring to it as shadow IT, it's now referred to as citizen IT, meaning that we're shifting from this concept of anything that is developed outside of an IT department is bad. No, it's about how can we actually help innovate in a scalable and secure way, and that's what the Power Platform helps you do. In fact, it's actually helped highlight some security vulnerabilities existing in organizations where we can actually go and apply security or governance over the top of that to make it more secure. So what it's actually doing is helping, I guess, sort of clean up the ship, so to speak, in a lot of these organizations. And this is just a catalyst to be able to do that. Obviously, dealing with more types of data, as I mentioned earlier, 10% of data that will be created will be from generative AI, requires stronger data loss prevention. So how can we use the features of Power Platform to help apply data loss prevention policies across the different data that a broader set of users will have or may potentially need access to? And then how can I get visibility over all these processes? So the common, business critical Excel spreadsheet, there's not a lot of visibility over that now from an IT perspective or admin perspective. How can we use these tools to actually increase our visibility and governance over solutions where we didn't necessarily have visibility before? And I guess this is probably just one of the key highlighting facts around that is 72% of IT executives are unaware of the number of shadow IT apps in their organization. So that just gives you an indication that there is that potential risk there at the moment, that there is citizen developed or shadow IT applications which aren't secure, which there isn't the level of visibility over. And I guess that's where the Power Platform helps solve that problem. Is firstly, it makes governance mandated. It helps develop and implement a strategy across low-code technologies and how you can actually deploy approved solutions to your organization in a safe and secure way. It also allows flexibility where needed. So if you are a citizen developer and you're developing applications, you might have access to a smaller subset of connectors or integrations that, say, a professional developer does. So you can have different courses or different personas and different places that they can go and develop, and based on the guardrails that are relevant to them, they'll present themselves at different places. So one of the key advantages of the Power Platform or the Microsoft Cloud in general is it's a unified platform. It's built on Azure. A lot of the core capabilities within our Power Platform, when we speak from a governance perspective, if it's data loss prevention policies or connector management through APIM, things like that, it's pretty much all through the underlying Azure technology or underlying Azure stack. So what that does is give us a great level of scalability and security and identity through Active Directory or Entra ID as it's referred to now. So it's all able to be managed in a single pane of glass. And with the introduction of AI across all these technologies, Microsoft adheres to the responsible AI principles. So you can be rest assured that when we're dealing with AI throughout any of our products, that there's a few things that we make sure that we do specifically with your data or necessarily don't do with your data. So your data is certainly your data. We don't use your data to train or fine tune any of our foundational AI models. And your data is protected by that underlying Azure capability that we mentioned earlier. So we do have responsible AI documentation and details about how we do handle your information from a security perspective that we'll be happy to share throughout the chat as well. But really, what we need to know now is, I guess, how do we get started on our governance journey? And it depends on where you are in your Power Platform adoption journey. So you might be an organization that has 100,000 users and people have been using Power Platform for quite a while, and there's quite a few solutions and it's a bit of a reactive cleanup process. You might be just starting out fresh and you're just tipping your toes in the water and you wanted to find out where to start. So depending on where your organization is at in the journey will depend on where you need to apply focus to. But we do have what's called the Adoption Maturity Framework, which is a guidance, I guess, for organizations to understand where to start first. And to deliver optimal governance across Power Platform, it really boils down to these three key themes. There's probably more if you wanted to drill further into it, but firstly, how do you secure the platform? Secondly, how do you get visibility or monitor platform? And thirdly, how do you manage the platform? So if we focus specifically on security, there's security at various levels across Power Platform. Firstly, we have cross-tenant isolation, so we can restrict access across tenancies. We can also restrict access at the environment level as well. So I'll talk a little bit about environments later on and what they mean for the context of Power Platform, but essentially have specific security roles inside the Power Platform where people can do certain activities within the context of an environment, but might not necessarily have that access in other environments. There's also resource level permissions, meaning that we can give access to certain Power Automate flows or Power Apps or Copilots as an example. And then also Dataverse security. So at the database level, whether it's row level security, column level security, business hierarchical security, we can apply security at the data level as well. So at the tenant level, we have a number of different service level admin roles. So we have global administrator basically, which gives you access to be able to perform all the functions across your Office 365 environment. There's Power Platform administrator specific roles, which means that you have admin roles across Power Platform specifically. Delegated admin roles, so if you do need to delegate to somebody, that's also possible as well. And then also environment admin roles. So in the context of an environment, you know, people might be an administrator in that specific environment, but not in other environments. We also have conditional access policies. So if you wanted to restrict access based on certain users or groups or even device types or locations as to where the services are being accessed, this can be handled in the combination with Entra ID. So we have conditional service access policies that can be applied, as well as data loss prevention policies. So we can create customized data loss prevention policies at the tenant level and then apply them to specific environments or clusters of environments. And what that means is that we have around 1,100 connectors across the Power Platform, which are essentially pre-packaged APIs into various systems, and also the ability to create custom connectors. We can package those up into certain data loss prevention policies and tie them back to environments. And then we can classify each of those connectors as either business data only or no business data allowed or just blocked entirely. So your organization might have a specific environment, which is for professional developers where they need to access the SQL Server connector. So you might allow business data in that particular DLP policy and assign it to those environments. But in the contrary to that, you might have a citizen developer environment where you don't want people accessing SQL Server. So you either block that or indicate that there's no business data allowed. And then what that means is from a developer perspective, when they try and access the service and combine different connectors into their solutions, if they conflict against the data loss prevention policy, they'll just get a pop-up to say, hey, look, you can't do this because of the data loss prevention policy violation. We can also enable content security policies. So this enables, or this is enabled across model-driven applications and also Canvas applications. You can toggle that on through the admin center and then report violations sent to a specific endpoint as well. Now, moving on to monitoring, what are some of the monitoring features that we have in Power Platform? So we have usage analytics. So this is native to the Power Platform admin center, where you can see things like number of users that are accessing solutions, the locations in which they're accessing from, and then also some details around capacity. So if you have Dataverse solutions, how much capacity is being consumed in what environments, as an example, but it also extends across other products as well. We also have the ability to track health and implementation metrics. So if you wanted to see, you know, toast errors, service performance, app usage metrics, that's also available through the admin center as well. Or if the out-of-the-box analytics within the admin center aren't sufficient or you need some more granular detail, then we also have Power BI reports, which are able to, you can leverage off some of the ones that are in the Center of Excellence starter kit, which I'll talk about a little bit later on as well. But also the ability to build your own custom reports on Power BI using some of the management connectors. So pretty much the options to be able to cover any scenario that you need from a reporting perspective by either creating your own report or using the out-of-the-box analytics. You can also integrate audit logs from Power Platform into many SIEM vendors as well. So by default, Power Apps, Power Automate, Dataverse audit records are available in the M365 Defender portal, Microsoft Purview Compliance portal, and also the Exchange Admin Center. So that's some of the activity audits that are available. But we also have the ability to integrate into application insights as well. So if you have a specific solution and you wanted to get some granular detail about how that particular solution was performing, then you could do that through Azure Application Insights as well. There's also other features baked into the individual products, like Power Apps, for instance, has a monitor feature. So if you wanted to do some diagnostics at a solution level and see how your application's performing and what services it's calling and how long that takes, you can do that through the monitor feature as well. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about how do you actually manage the environments. And this kind of ties into managed environments, which we'll get Fushen to talk about in a little bit more detail. But just to cover it off at a really basic level, what is an environment in Power Platform? Essentially, it's a space to store and manage organizations' data, apps, chatbots, and flows. So we can contain pretty much any of the elements that make up a Power Platform solution in the context of an environment. It essentially serves as a container, and we can target those to different audiences with different security requirements and so on and so forth. So environments is essentially how we would enable ALM across Power Platform by having a dev, test, and production environment, or a similar sort of cluster of environments. There's a few different types of environments that we can create. We can create trial environments, developer environments. We have the default environment, which I guess is probably the point in which we see a lot of app sprawl and stuff like that. So it's really important to make sure that the default environment is being managed correctly from a governance perspective. And then we have sandbox and production environments, which are typically used through for an ALM process. So sandbox, you might create your dev and test environments in there, and then production is obviously production. We also have the concept of solution. So a solution is essentially how we pre-package all of these components that make up a solution. And then that's what we actually deploy to all of these environments from an ALM perspective. So we can package up anything from flows to reporting to tables into a solution, and then deploy across the environments as either an unmanaged solution, meaning that people can pick it up in the target environment and continue to work on it, or as a managed solution, meaning that it's sealed and it's deployed as a solution and you can't edit it. So kind of the manual way to enable ALM at the moment is going into a solution itself, clicking on the export button. This will give you the option to select whether you wanted to export it as managed or unmanaged. It gives you the option to publish changes, to check for any issues. It will then give you a zip file, which you can then go and import into your target interface. So if you wanted to kind of build out your own ALM process at the moment, or automated CI/CD pipeline, we have Power Platform build tools in Azure DevOps. And we also have specific Power Platform GitHub actions. So you can actually build out the CI/CD pipeline manually if you like in either Azure DevOps or GitHub. But what we're going to talk about a bit later on in Fushen's session is how you can actually do a low-code approach to this in managed environments to automate a lot of that process without having to build out that CI/CD pipeline yourself. Now, one of the most effective ways that we've seen governance adopted across large organizations is by enabling what's known as a center of excellence. So center of excellence is more focused on the strategy and vision of low code in the organization in general, administering the platform and the governance associated to the platform. So those three key steps around secure, monitor, and manage. Typically a center of excellence in conjunction with maybe an IT team or a combination of both business and IT would work on that. And then how do we nurture and support? So depending on your organization might depend on how you actually approach this and the different roles and responsibilities in which different business unit or IT unit that would sit in. But ultimately there's different key themes or streams, I guess, in regards to where you might build a V team to approach some of this stuff. So from a strategy perspective, you'd probably need some key executives in there to define what low code looks like in your organization. And also sort of some forward thinking about what a future with AI and low code might look like. There might be a Power Platform admin team, which is more focused around how do we actually make this platform safe and secure and put up those guardrails for everybody. and nurture team, which could be people from the business that are evangelists of the Power Platform and, have built some cool stuff and they go around, show other people how to do it, do hackathons, so on and so forth. You might have a fusion team or a team of IT professionals working with business folk to be able to build reusable automation. So your IT team might be building out, custom APIs into bespoke systems that you have or certain systems for your organization and making those available to citizen developers. And then how do you actually support the platform ongoing as well, or any of the solutions that are being developed? So there's a bit to think about there, I guess, in regards to roles and responsibilities and where they sit in your business. But these are just some of the key sort of areas that we see organizations target when they're implementing Power Platform governance. And probably one of the key things, or almost one of the key steps, I guess, is particularly coming from a customer background myself, is to understand an environment strategy in your organization. So this is basically how you would tier the different types of environments that your end users would be interacting with based on certain criteria. So for instance, this is more of a simplified view, but it could be more complex or even more simple in your scenario. This is basically saying at the bottom level of this triangle, or the bottom tier, we have productivity environments. And this is for non-business critical applications. These are typically for personal productivity scenarios. There doesn't need to be ALM for these solutions, because it might just be something like automating a mundane task or doing something within a specific team that doesn't have any data vulnerabilities or doesn't interact with personal data or any of that kind of stuff. It's just some of the more simple stuff that you just need a space to be able to develop and have visibility over that from an admin perspective. So we can create productivity environments to do that. The next tier up might be something that touches specific business units. It's not necessarily business critical, but it's important. ALM is optional in this case. It might be something that still takes a while to deliver, and it could be something that's delivered by both IT or business folk, or by business folk or citizen makers. But really, it's just that in-between step, and it mightn't necessarily need ALM, but we might also need access to some more additional connectors and integrations that you wouldn't have in the productivity environment. And then the top rung, or the top tier, is if we have a business critical application, it's developed and supported by IT, requires ALM, managed solutions in the production environment. It's a whole bunch of more governance. But I guess the key thing, and going back to the point that I mentioned at the start of this, is that there's the flexibility to cater for almost any scenario in Power Platform. It's across every single type of persona that you can think of from a solution development perspective. On the upper end of the critical stage, we have IT heavy, all the way down to something that's just helping people solve some mundane tasks. So that's the beauty of the Power Platform. But some of the tools that we offer to be able to get this up and going for you is probably the legacy way to do it, or something that's been around for a while, is what we call the Center of Excellence Starter Kit. So this is a little bit more broader than what Fushen will talk about, but this contains templatized applications for certain processes to help enforce governance. It contains reporting. There's a whole bunch of different tools to help enforce some of the governance procedures that I mentioned earlier. But really what we have now is what we call managed environments. And this is including intelligence throughout managed environments to be able to make it as easy as possible for admins to be able to apply governance across their organization at scale. And then this is where I'm going to hand it over to Fushen to talk about that a little bit more.
Thank you, Nathan. Hi, everyone. So we talk about environment strategy, the COE starter kit, DLP, so on and so forth. But one of the things we look at, a lot of our customers adopting the Power Platform, you literally can look at two different ends of the spectrum. So on one end, you probably have people doing it organically with self-service, basic personal productivity type solution. And on the other end of the spectrum, or the tip of the pyramid from the diagram that Nathan was showing earlier, you have IT fully controlling the platform, and all the apps were corrected by IT with ALM and some tight governance policy around that. So the question that we want to put forward is that how do you do that at scale? How do you merge these two ends of the spectrum? And they kind of literally tend to be contradicting with each other. For example, you wouldn't have self-service, citizen developer, and ALM in the same sentence, because they're kind of not compatible for historical reason and for a lot of other pro developer kind of paradigm that doesn't really sit with a citizen developer. So we want to have the question like, how do you then scale to allow the citizen developer to graduate into a more controlled approach to building solution, and therefore we want them to build higher value solution apart from your day-to-day productivity enhancements. So we're talking about how do you allow the citizen developer from creating the basic car booking application and go into the higher value applications, like how do you do finance invoicing, if that finance invoicing solution is something that a finance person may be best positioned to look at from a solution point of view. So that kind of the thinking that we actually put together here and what we mean by enterprise mode. We'll look at enterprise mode is to enable you to allow citizen developer to elevate that value that they're producing in the Power Platform, and yet have the best of both worlds, in the sense that you can be self-service with citizen developer, and yet you have the full control that you might want to exert or impose from a central IT point of view. And with that, we seek to answer some of this question that we hear a lot from customers. How do you control oversharing of apps? How do you enforce ALM to citizen developers in an easy way? How do you keep your default environment clean? So those are some of the common examples that we hear from a lot of customers. These are the common challenges that allows you to move from your productivity type of applications to enterprise mode. And the way we're thinking about it is this concept called managed environment. So managed environment is a suite of features that we put together, and we are investing heavily on this particular set of features, and we are rolling it out as we speak. So you probably have heard of this for around 6 months at least, and we are doing it in iterative manner. So we release a set of features at the very beginning, and we are releasing more as we go on, and there'll be more and more capability that we'll put into this particular feature set. So here's a kind of a list of all the capabilities that we have today. Some of them are still in preview, but we will continue to add and invest more into this. So for the next few minutes, I will zoom into the relevant features here, and I'll highlight each one of them and what does it mean to you from a broader governance point of view, and how can you actually move away from reactive governance to a proactive governance method, and therefore allowing you to have higher scale in terms of building high quality apps, enterprise mode from the citizen developers, as well as from a Fusion developer and IT based point of view. Now, the first one we'll talk about is how do you limit sharing. So this is one of the most common control that we got requests from customers when you talk about citizen developer. So you might want to facilitate the ability for your developers or citizen makers to actually create and innovate and try things out. But the moment you share it to everybody in the entire organization, you might want to take it as a signal to say that this is going to be enterprise-wide. Now, when you do that, you might want to impose some process behind that. So it could be, for example, oh, sorry, I think the screen is not moving. I apologize for that. I'll go just step back a little bit and show you the list of the managed environment features and capabilities. So let's zoom into some of them. So the first one I'm going to talk about is sharing control. So what sharing control here means, you might want to pick a process to say if you're sharing above a certain threshold, you will want your makers to go through a particular process. So one way to preempt that is to limit the sharing. And you can say you cannot share more than 5 people. If you share more than 5 people, that is automatically a departmental solution, and that requires you to request access to a particular environment. If you share to everybody, that's automatically enterprise, and therefore you have to go through ALM and some other process that you need to put in place. So that allows you to preempt that so that your user can continue to innovate, but they can only share it within a small group of users, for example, or you may even say for a particular security group that you allow them to share with. So this is one of the top requests for a lot of customers when you want to allow your citizen makers to create apps, and yet you want to actually have a process for them to move into enterprise in a later stage. And then the next one we want to talk about is usage insight. So the top insights that our customers wanted to have in a high scale environment is to look at things like which are the apps and flows that are highly used by my users, and which are the ones that are not used in a recent time frame. So that gives you two end of the insight. So one is which one is the most popular one. So you might want to take action on them. For example, if this is citizen developed apps, and you might want to say, look, it has become so popular between the organization, it becomes so important, it's impacting a lot of users. You might want to promote it to a more controlled environment. Likewise, on the other end of the spectrum, you may have apps that could be dormant and maybe that's no longer giving value. It may have been superseded by other process, or it may be abandoned by the maker. And you might want to take action based on that as well. Whether you want to clean it up or you want to quarantine it, you can take all those actions based on those insights. So all this will be out of the box as part of managed environment. You will straight away see what we call a weekly digest, and it will show you the top apps and the dormant apps as well. And it gives you a statistics and a number as a summary. Another thing that we introduced in part of managed environment is to preempt the user from doing things in the wrong environment. For example, you may have an environment that is designated only for training purposes. So you might not want a HR person to create HR solution there, because then the HR person should go to the HR environment and create it there. So one way to preempt that is to have a notification that shows up in your face. So they can do that through the welcome content feature in managed environment. You can go and select this option, turn it on, and then you can provide your own custom links, your own custom message here. We support markdown format. So that means you can even put a link to your policy documents or your rules of engagement there and target it to a specific environment. So if a maker were to hit that particular environment the first time, you will see that message right at the beginning. So the maker can then be informed based on the links that you provide there and understand what's the purpose and intent of that particular environment before the person go ahead and create the solution. So again, a lot is a proactive kind of approach. So you don't have to get to the point where you need to clean up and move things around, because they should belong in a different environment, and because it's been corrected, you have to move them after the fact. And also helps you from having the need to you should still inform your users about your environment strategy once you identify what that environment is for what particular usage. But this helps you to reinforce that and helps you to kind of preempt the purpose of that messaging of that purpose of that particular environment. So welcome content is actually in preview right now. You are free to test it out and see what kind of impact you can actually have with your makers as well. And the next one is particularly important here, and this is what we call the pipeline. Oh, sorry, actually pipeline features. So pipeline also includes extensibility that I'll talk about later on. Now, Nathan mentioned about ALM, and this is a very important ingredient as part of your enterprise strategy with Power Platform. You might want to allow your citizen developers to create a solution in the default environment if it's within productivity space. But the moment you want to do something more meaningful or of a higher value to a broader set of users with greater impact, you absolutely will want ALM. ALM here allows you to impose a tight control around what gets changed and when does it get deployed as a production type of apps, rather than allowing your maker to go and make changes in production right away without any control or anything that you want to put in place there. So the concept of ALM requires a minimum of 3 environments. So one is what we call the host environment, which is the configuration. This is where you actually use it as an admin to specify which environment is designated as a source or developer, and which environment is designated as a target environment, which could either be a test environment or production, staging, or anything that's outside of dev. And how did that move from one environment to another is also dictated by what we call the pipeline stages. So that could be a stage between developer and test, and there could be another stage subsequently to that between test to production. And that is all this definition is actually stored within the pipeline definitions in the host environment. And you need to have a minimum of 2 other environments. One will be your source and the other one will be target. You can have more than one target environment because you may have UAT or prod. You may have more than that. You could have UAT, pre-prod, staging, and then production. That is all good. You can configure all those things. And what happens within those pipelines, you can create extensibility points, and that allows you to create things like approval. For example, before you export the solution, you might want to run some additional check. You may even create a ticket in your external ITSM solution. And once the ticket has been approved, then only you allow that to be deployed. You can absolutely do all those things. So that includes any connector that we have in Power Automate, because the extensibility point here actually leverages Power Automate. And likewise, you can actually create what we call a delegated deployment that allows you to use a service principal to perform the actual deployment instead of a user account. That is also possible. And you have the final stage, which is called pre-deployment. You may want to do things like alert the owner, or maybe do a scheduling, or run any other last-minute checks before you actually do the final deployment. So there's 3 stages that we expose within the extensibility point that you can actually extend and use Power Automate to impose your own process around them. And that configuration is super easy. So once you have managed environment and you have pipeline enabled, you will have a configuration page that you can actually tick off a few boxes. For example, you may say, I want to have a pre-export approval in place. I may want to have a delegated deployment and specify a service principal, and I want to have a pre-deployment extension as well. And there's just checkboxes here, but after you're done with the checkboxes, you can use Power Automate to then orchestrate those processes behind pre-export, delegation, and pre-deployment. And we also have a post-deployment, a deployment completion event that will be raised as well, so you can actually run additional process behind that. At any point of these steps, you can also influence the outcome. For example, you may say rejected because the approver say, no, you can't deploy today. I will hit reject, and it will stop the deployment. So all these controls are there within the pipeline extensibility, and all we need to do is to enable that and use it as part of Power Automate actions. And these are built into the Power Automate connectors. You can actually say when an action is performed and select a particular pipeline event, and that pipeline event will allow you to hook into that process. Now, from the end user point of view, earlier I make a statement that in the traditional world, citizen developer and ALM tend to be contradictory. If you want to push ALM discipline to your citizen developer, most of the time you risk pushing your citizen developer away, and they end up doing Excel. So how do we make it easier? So we have ability to do ALM today, as Nathan mentioned. You can do it manually, which is not in the enterprise mode. You can do it through a pro-dev approach using Azure DevOps, GitHub, and any other compatible DevOps tooling. But what we do with the pipeline configuration that I showed you earlier, once you've configured it, you publish it, you can even set up permission as to who can use those pipelines, and you can target specific environments, and what the maker will see is this particular experience here. The maker will go to the solution and hit on pipelines. You will see an option in the solution panel on the left. It will show you pipelines, and you will have the ability to select. You can't select actually because that's actually predefined by the pipeline as per what your admin have set up, but you have a button to say deploy here. When you click deploy here, it will then trigger that process that you've configured within your pipeline, and that could include triggering an approval from your manager to click approve before it gets deployed, or check against your existing ITSM ticket to see whether it's been approved or not. You can do all those things as long as you can achieve that in Power Automate. It will actually work with this pipeline and the extensibility with that. So that encourages your citizen developer to get introduced to the discipline of ALM, at the same time not exposing them to the entire complexity of DevOps. So all they need to do is just consume the pipeline, and there's a separation of concern here where your admin or your pro devs will be the one who actually determine what goes on behind the scene, what goes on between your dev to test to UAT and to prod as well. So that's on pipeline, and a lot of customers, this is one of the top requirement, and in fact the top feature usage in terms of managed environment. This makes it so much easier for you to implement or impose a healthy ALM within your organization in Power Platform. The next one I'm going to talk about is Power Platform Advisor. So we talk a lot about being able to proactively take over governance rather than reactively monitoring. You can have all those reports and then decided what you need to do with that. You actually see I spoke about insights earlier on as part of your managed environment feature, where we can actually report on what are the top apps and what are the dormant apps as well. Advisor analyzes your entire environment and gives you suggestions as to what you need to do. And some of the suggestions we can actually give includes things like what are the apps that are dormant, that have not been used in the last 60 days. Here's an example there. And what action you can do out of it. So you may want to say, I want to delete the app. I may want to quarantine the app as an example. And one of the good things is that I don't have to look at it in every different environment to find out which of these apps fall under this bucket. It will tell me straight away all the apps within all my managed environment. These are the apps that needs action, and I don't need to take actions one by one. And what you can see here in this particular screenshot, I can just select multiple apps, and I can be one click away to say, I want to quarantine all these apps while I figure out what to do with them. So quarantining here means you can't use the app anymore as the end user, but it's not deleted. The end user can't run the app. It's already quarantined, but it's still there. In case you want to revive them, you still be able to move it away from quarantine. Whereas you might also decide, I want to clean them all up. I can hit delete, and all the other apps that are selected here will be deleted across multiple environments. So it makes it so much easier for you to, as an admin, to govern them. And at the same time, you don't need to go and hunt what kind of actions you need to take and what apps you need to take those actions on, because the advisor will tell you that. Another example that an advisor will give you is to look at apps that do not have a valid owner, so or orphan apps. So it might be because the person has moved on and therefore there's no owner. Or what you want to do is you might want to reassign the app. So you can select to say, I want to promote a co-owner to become the primary owner, or I can specifically select who is the actual owner for the new app now. And again, advisor tells you all those things across all the managed environments, so you don't have to look it up at an environment by environment basis. And at the same time, it's just multi-select of the apps, and one click away, you can just rehome them to a particular owner in just 2 clicks. So it makes it so much easier for you to manage those, as opposed to going one by one. Now, on top of that, because as an admin, I might want to delegate that decision to a particular environment owner. So give an example, you may have a HR app that's owned by a HR environment. You might not want to be the one who decide who owns the new app now, or whether you want to quarantine, or maybe you want to delete the app. That decision might sit better with the HR environment owner. So what we can do is we can actually share that recommendation. And when you share the recommendation, you actually see a screenshot here which just shows up a card in Teams to that environment owner or whoever you share it with. And that person will get the recommendation. Do you want to quarantine? Do you want to reassign owner? What you want to do with that? And that's a delegation to another admin to take the steps recommended by Platform Advisor. So this is also in preview. Now, this is, again, one of the top features that we are rolling out with Managed Environment, to be ahead of the curve and to be proactive around your governance rather than requiring you to do reactively. Other new feature we had is environment routing, also in preview. What environment routing does is that for every new user who lands the default environment, you can create a policy to say, route your user to a new developer environment. The point of this feature is to allow you to set up a personal developer environment in the same way that you might want to think people will use your personal OneDrive without polluting your SharePoint. So you might want to have that desire to say, I want you to innovate and learn in your developer environment first before you go and create something in the default environment or in any other environment. So the default environment routing feature is also part of the managed environment settings. You can actually turn it on, and you get routed to the target environment, which will be managed. Your default don't have to be managed to use this, but the target environment will be managed. In that case here, we'll be creating a developer environment. We have plans in the roadmap to allow you to route to a specific environment instead of creating a developer environment. But today, as on current preview, it will actually route you to a developer environment. That routing, we will come back to that, but the other feature that comes in tandem with that will be environment groups and environment rules. So environment groups allows you to create a logical grouping of environments. For example, you might say all developer environments will be within this group. All my UAT environment is in this other group. All my production environment is in this other group. And that grouping allows you to do some very fantastic automation around that. So one of the things that we do is to allow you to set rules. So the rules, for example, you might say, all the managed environment rule that I explained today, for example, you might say you cap sharing to only 5 people. So any developer environment that goes into this group, into this developer environment group, will apply this rule automatically. You don't have to manually go and set it for every environment that gets created. As long as they sit in the particular group, it will take the rule that you specify for that particular group. So that allows you to manage the policy in a more scalable manner. And it doesn't matter, you have thousands of environments, but as long as you manage them into groups, it makes the management of them so much easier because you can set up the rules, and the rules will be applicable at the group level. And every member of that group will have the rules applied. And how that relate back to environment routing, because when you set the environment routing policy, you can say all the new environment that gets created, automatically move them to that particular group. So this example here, you can see I selected dev environments as my group name. So any new environment that gets created as part of my environment routing gets created in this group, and therefore any policy or any rules that are set up for that group will apply. So I don't have to apply them one by one. I just turn this on, select the group, and off I go. Any new maker who went to default, they get a new developer environment created. That environment is automatically added to this group, and all the rules that are specified for the group will apply. And that's it, right? So this is automated governance at its best, as an example of that. Now, the other thing we have is solution checker. So for anything that's, like for example, I may create a solution group called production. I may say any solution that gets deployed to production must go through a solution checker, and we want to enforce the strictest level possible. We have 3 levels here. We have none, warn, and block. Block is the strictest level. It means if the solution fail any of the checking, it will not be deployed. Warn, that means I accept certain warnings, and none means for developer environment, for example, I'm happy for you to test things out and you can break things, it doesn't matter. But I may want to block for any types of warning or any types of issues in production. So what are those things that we block? So we can say things like anything that you have a particular issue with your formula in your Canvas set, for example, or you fail one of the performance checks as part of your app checker, we will block it. And maybe warning around some accessibility checker issue. So if you have done Canvas app before, you probably noticed as an app checker. Result of app checker is also used as part of your solution checker, but solution checker is much broader than that. It also checks things like web resource in your model-driven apps. It checks for plugins, custom connectors, all those things will be checked, and it will flag certain performance issues or certain problems that you may have within that particular solution, and now you can actually block them from being deployed into the target environment if you turn this on. You also have the option to say send the admin an email alert if the solution is being blocked, because someone may be trying to promote a solution that's not in the best shape, not in the most healthy way, and you get alerted, so you can actually address them proactively and go and educate the developer to say there's certain best practices you need to follow, and then you should have end up with a healthier environment quality with that. Now, last but not least, this is one of my favorite feature that's coming soon, and this Power Catalog. Now, what does Power Catalog here means is that you have the ability to allow your makers to submit templates, and that template could mean controls or components or even screens and apps. And once you submitted it, you may want to impose some approval process in place. You can categorize them, and what happens with that, it will just show up in the in-product catalog for your other makers to consume. And what consuming means you can actually reuse them. So we want to promote reusability. Now, some example here includes you may have a component that is designated as an official header for every screen in your organization, branded and approved by your branding team. And you do not want every maker to recreate every time, and you do not want them to go all over the place and create different type of branding. So one way to make it encourage a more consistent solution is to put them into your catalog and have your maker to discover that easily and to consume them. So this is new, and we have some of these experiences already today. However, this experience is for admin. If you go to the link that I have here about Power Catalog, you will have you see a bunch of PowerShell and CLI command that you use to create a catalog. You can use it to submit access to it, but it's all PowerShell and CLI based. What we are doing today with the release sometime next month as a public preview is a maker experience. So you see this example of a screenshot, you'll see a catalog option in product, and that gives you this built-in catalog where you can use it as part of your maker. And likewise, there's also a maker experience to submit into the catalog by select any existing asset in Power Apps. Click on it, and there's a publish to catalog option that will show up, and you can actually click on that, and that will trigger that submission process. So there's a lot of things that we have invested into Power Platform Managed Environment, and you can see a lot of these things are leaning towards make it more automated, make it more proactive, so that you don't have to do a lot of your manual process, or even make it less reactive for you to chase after governance. So there's a lot of exciting features that we'll continue to roll out and invest into managed environment. So hopefully that gives you a good view of where we are going with this as well. So with that, yeah, we hope you get a lot out of this. And I'll hand back to Nathan to talk about what's next as well.
All right, I think we're actually going to go to the Q&A now. So I just wanted to invite Eugene on to talk about or answer some questions that we have from the live chat. So Eugene, are you there, mate?
I am. So thank you, Nathan. For those of you who don't know me, so I am Eugene. I'm the go-to-market lead for Power Platform across Asia. I've been on a few sessions today. It's been a long day for Power Platform, but it's been a good day. And to Nathan's point, we do have 10 minutes or so just to answer some questions. So keep them coming through the chat. Whichever ones we can get across, we will aim to answer them live between Fu Shen and Nathan. And before I jump into that, really quickly, just to touch on what we do have on this in terms of what next and all the resources that have been shared, please leverage them. There are a lot of assets that the PowerCat team and Fu Shen's teams have built to really help make your journey to governance that much simpler, to give you the starting base to really build from. So explore those hubs. I think this is probably the most comprehensive set of governance resources you will probably find out of all the low-code, no-code vendors. So please make the most of it and leverage what you can. So with that in mind, let's jump to some of the questions that we've got coming through the chat. So I don't know how you want to do this between yourself, Nathan, and Fu Shen, but the first one is, can I select which geographical region my Power Platform environment is hosted in?
I can take the first one. Yeah, so usually you want to think about that from a data sovereignty point of view. You might want to say, I want to make sure all my assets that created in Power Platform stays in Australia. Good news is that Australia is a geography region that is available in Power Platform. We have a lot of other regions that's available, provided that you have. I mean, if you create a particular environment, one of the things you can select is which geography you want it to be home in. There's the one little nuance there. If your tenant is non-Australia, you need to go through an assumption process to allow you to create an Australia-based region environment. But if you're Australia tenant, then it shouldn't be an issue. So those are the things that you need to consider. But yes, definitely you can actually select which environment region where your Power Platform environment is hosted.
Perfect. And I think this next one builds on that first question. So back to the routing aspect. So how can I prevent users from making changes in my production environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that goes along with ALM as well. So if you want to lock it down, you should absolutely only allow, from an ALM principle point of view, any changes should only happen in developer environment. And as you're happy with the changes, you release it and it goes to testing. Your testers will have access to the test environment. Once you've gone through those rigorous testing, they should be going to production. So Nathan talked about it earlier. So you need to have managed solution in your test and prod. Your dev will be unmanaged. So rule number one is never have unmanaged solution in your test and prod. Don't do that, right? So that's 100% against the ethos of ALM of DevOps itself. Another question is like, can you disable that? And the short answer is yes. You can now have an option in the environment settings to have a checkbox to say disable unmanaged solution. Done. So that means that you can never have unmanaged solution in your test and prod, but you can absolutely allow it in dev. So that blocks your user from having the ability to edit that particular solution in the particular environment. Now that is only applicable if you have the user have the maker permission in the first place. But usually you won't have that. Like even for production environment, you have your developer will not have the sufficient permission to edit something. But in the event they do, then you should block your unmanaged solution.
Lovely. So very comprehensive on that front. And I think this third one, I love how they just keep building on each other. Can I set up an approval before any apps are ultimately deployed to production?
Yeah, that one?
Yeah.
So you certainly can within, if you create your own customized ALM pipeline in the ProDev way using GitHub or Azure DevOps, you can create your own approval steps as a part of those CI/CD pipelines. Pipelines also support approvals. So in managed environments, that feature that Fushen was mentioning, I'm not sure if he has any slides or anything that shows that, but there is the ability to actually include an approval step as a part of that. So you can have, I guess, an additional approval before things are pushed to production or test environments. Anything you wanted to expand on that, Fushen?
Yeah, 100%. And we already have customers who are happily using that. And one of the top asks from customers is, I want to have that control gate, and that is already available in pipeline today.
Alrighty, well, okay, so this comes back to the managed versus unmanaged environments question. So it's a pretty open-ended one. So we might end up going down a laundry list, but it's quite simple. What are some of the pros and cons for managed versus unmanaged for production environments?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it first, and then Nathan, you can chime in. But I think the way we are thinking about it is managed environment is when you do have a strong intention to make it enterprise. Right. In a lot of sense, like a lot of customers are perfectly comfortable for unmanaged environments, which is the standard ones, as long as you have the proper the proper guidelines and the proper limits in place. For example, DLP, you can only use it within your productivity space, for example, within Office 365. A lot of customers are perfectly comfortable with that. But the challenge here is that what value you want to derive out of it, right? So if I want to think that productivity tend to have a value derivation for a smaller group of users, whether I'm creating value for myself from a personal productivity standpoint, or maybe from a smaller team. Now, somewhere in the middle is where I start generating value for my department, but I would love to have my users generating value for the entire organization. Now, to generate value for the entire organization in a safe way, because I want to be able to monitor and provide those guardrails. And that's where we think managed environment will come into play. So in a simple answer to that is, if you're happy with productivity, you can use standard environments or the unmanaged one. We don't actually use the term unmanaged, but it's just normal environment. But if you have the intent to go into enterprise mode with the desire to derive enterprise level of values out of it, we definitely should recommend you to look into managed environment, because you want to impose those rules. You want to make it more proactively or preemptively blocking certain things and enable those solution health and the ALM health around that. That should be where we want to think about it.
Great. So I think we've got time for, we've got 3 more minutes, so we'll try and get 1 or 2 more out there before we close up. So this one is all around multiple environments, and of course it comes back to cost. So when organizations think about the creation of multiple environments, obviously to better manage their governance and better manage the user experience and deployment, will this require more storage costs in terms of licensing?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So you need a minimum of 1 gigabyte worth of available Dataverse storage to create a new environment. So it depends on how much capacity is available across your Power Platform environments. I'd mentioned some of the reports earlier in the admin center where you can get visibility of what's available in your environments as well across your Power Platform tenancy and what's being consumed by each environment. So yeah, as long as you have enough capacity available, there's a couple of ways that you can get capacity. The first is if you have licensing, typically you will have some allocated Dataverse capacity as a result of that, of those licenses. So it's worth just going to the admin center to see what you currently already have available there. If you don't have capacity available, then there's a couple of options. You can either procure more licenses for end users, which gives you some Dataverse entitlements, or just purchase additional Dataverse capacity. But a minimum of 1 gigabyte per environment's required just to get it stood up.
And to build on that question, this is just something top of mind from my perspective. What are some best practices between yourself, Nathan, and Fushen that you would advise customers to do if they are in a very cost-sensitive state when it comes to storage?
Look, I don't think really it doesn't come down to a storage perspective. I guess you kind of need to just weigh up what the business or the organization values when it comes to to a governance perspective and security perspective, and what fits a particular purpose. Fushen mentioned for enterprise-wide adoption of low code and really hands-off governance, managed environments is the way to go for that. That being said, that does have some licensing implications once it's switched on to be able to enable that. But it's really intentional in regards to managed environments that is specific for enterprise-wide governance adoption of low code. I mean, there are some other ways to be able to apply governance. It doesn't necessarily mean everything outside of managed environments is not secure or anything like that. It just means that there might be a little bit more admin work required. But yeah, there's almost, build your own journey, I guess, in regards to what your governance process is to look like and how much influence control you want to have over your environments. Sometimes people want it to be more hands-off, which is managed environments. Sometimes people want to have granular control over everything and set up their own ALM pipelines and things like that, and we cater for all those scenarios. So it's not necessarily a cost sort of scenario. I guess it's more about what fits your purpose and how our cost structure fits into that.
Awesome. I want to add one more thing, which is around scale. Yeah, because I think you could hire more admins, or you could do a lot more manual work, but I think the keyword here is scale. Like from an enterprise point of view, you want to replicate your success or get more value in a more scalable manner. You don't want to create 2 value generating apps for the enterprise in a year. You might want to go for 20 or even 50 value generating apps for your enterprise, right? So that will be the incentive for you to think about. I wanted to do it at scale so I can get more benefit out of it. And that should be the motivation behind it.
Absolutely. Invest in it today, not to limit yourself for tomorrow, and be able to expand and very much scale as required, when required, to the limits that you ultimately are trying to achieve. So very, very valid and great feedback and great insights from both yourselves, Nathan, and also Fushen. So with that being said, we are at time. Massive thank you to everyone who has dialed in and joined us for this session, and an even bigger thank you back to Fushen and Nathan for pulling together what is an amazing 1 hour connection on the fundamentals, but also where to next, and also what's coming and how we're evolving our governance strategy and our governance capability across the platform. So with that, massive thank you to everyone for dialing in, for joining us for day 1 of the bootcamp for the Power Platform Day. If you do have any other questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to our Power Platform specialist teams across Asia via the link that will have been put in the chat. And of course, any feedback is a gift, so please let us know if there's anything that you'd like us to improve, change, do differently, or add for future sessions. And we would love to see that, so we can better refine and improve what we share and the insights to really make it as impactful as possible to all of you. So with that, thank you, and we hope you have a good day.